Imagine for a moment that you are in a situation where someone questions your worth, challenges your integrity, or even provokes you with words that strike directly at your deepest insecurities. What is your first impulse? To react, to explain yourself, to defend your name and your choices. It is almost instinctive, almost automatic. But what if the most powerful response is not to react, not to explain, but simply to disappear? What if silence and absence carry more transformative weight than words ever could? In today's exploration, we will uncover why Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, believed that our strength often lies not in confrontation, but in withdrawal. This may sound counterintuitive in a society that constantly tells us to speak up, defend yourself, and prove your point. Yet Jung understood something deeper about the human psyche. He recognized that explaining yourself to those unwilling to understand you is a form of self-betrayal. He knew that reacting impulsively ties you to the chains of others' expectations, and he saw that sometimes the greatest liberation comes from quietly stepping away. Before we move forward, if you are someone who is passionate about deep reflections, philosophy, psychology, and personal growth, make sure you subscribe to this channel, leave your like, comment your thoughts, and share this video. Throughout this journey, I promise you surprising revelations that can completely shift the way you see yourself, your relationships, and the world. And remember, the final insight we will uncover together is the most powerful of all, one that could truly redefine the way you live your life. Now, let us return to our central theme. Think of the countless times you have found yourself justifying your decisions, trying to explain your motives, or defending your identity. Did those explanations ever satisfy the other person? Or did they only drain your energy and make you feel misunderstood? Jung warned us about the futility of explaining ourselves to those who are not ready to listen. He saw how explanation becomes entanglement, how reaction becomes dependence, and how disappearance becomes freedom. But what does it mean to disappear? It does not mean cowardice, nor does it mean abandoning your values or neglecting your truth. Disappearing, in Jungian terms, is an act of reclaiming your inner space. It is choosing not to participate in a cycle of endless justification and conflict. It is the decision to withdraw your energy from places where it is wasted and redirect it toward your own growth and self-realization. Think about this. How many times have you felt the need to defend yourself against false assumptions? How many times have you wasted hours, even days, explaining yourself to people who had already decided not to understand you? And how many times, after all your effort, did you feel emptier rather than fulfilled? Jung's wisdom invites us to stop scattering our strength in this way. He teaches us that silence, distance, and non-reaction are not weaknesses. They are forms of mastery. There is a powerful lesson here about energy. Our attention is our most valuable currency. Wherever we invest it, life grows. If we invest it in defending ourselves against attacks, criticisms, or misunderstandings, we feed those very forces. If instead we withdraw, we starve them of oxygen. In disappearing, we do not lose, we reclaim. We recover our inner authority, and we channel our energy toward transformation instead of conflict. Let us pause here and ask ourselves a difficult question. When was the last time you disappeared instead of reacting? When was the last time you chose silence over explanation? And what did that decision bring you? I invite you to reflect on this, and even share your answer in the comments, because your story may help others recognize their own patterns. Jung's teaching resonates deeply with ancient wisdom traditions as well. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus reminded us that it is not what happens to us that disturbs us, but our interpretation of it. By reacting to every word and action directed at us, we become enslaved to the outside world. By withdrawing, by refusing to be pulled into unnecessary battles, we find freedom. Buddhism, too, teaches the power of detachment, the art of letting go instead of clinging. And modern psychology reinforces this. Research on emotional regulation shows that those who pause, who refrain from impulsive reactions, are often more resilient and more at peace. But there is something uniquely Jungian about the idea of disappearing. For Jung, it was not just a tactic, it was a path to individuation, the process of becoming whole. When you stop explaining yourself to others, you begin listening to yourself. When you stop reacting to every provocation, you discover your own center. And when you disappear from spaces that drain you, you reappear in your own life with greater strength, clarity, and authenticity. Consider, then, the paradox. In disappearing from others, you reappear to yourself. You shift from the external to the internal, from the noise of misunderstanding to the quiet truth of your own being. This is not avoidance. It is transformation. It is not weakness. It is wisdom. And it is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. As we continue in this exploration, we will go even deeper into Jung's insights. We will see why silence is not empty, but full of meaning. We will discover how not reacting can protect us from manipulation and toxic dynamics. And we will uncover the profound power of stepping away, not as an escape, but as an act of self-realization. Remember, each part of this journey builds toward the most powerful insight of all, one that may change not just how you deal with others, but how you understand yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." These words reveal something profound about the nature of disappearing. To step away is not merely to escape, it is to heal, to recover, to realign yourself with what truly matters. But why is it so difficult to embrace this truth in our everyday lives? Think about how society has conditioned us. From an early age, we are taught to explain, to justify, to constantly prove who we are. If you are misunderstood, you are told to clarify. If you are criticized, you are told to defend yourself. The unspoken rule is that silence equals weakness and withdrawal equals defeat. Yet Jung challenged these assumptions. He believed that silence is not weakness but wisdom, and that withdrawal is not defeat but a conscious act of reclaiming your own soul. When you disappear instead of reacting, you refuse to play the game that others set for you. People who seek to provoke you expect resistance. They thrive on your explanations, your defensive words, and your justifications. Each time you react, you confirm their control. But when you choose to step away without reaction, without explanation, you dismantle the power they thought they had over you. You shift the balance entirely. Consider this. Have you ever noticed how silence unsettles people more than words? An explanation can be argued against, but silence cannot. A reaction invites escalation, but absence halts the cycle. By not responding, you protect your dignity. By not explaining, you protect your truth. By disappearing, you protect your energy. This is a form of quiet strength that Jung so often emphasized. Psychology today supports this idea with what is called the gray rock method, often used when dealing with toxic individuals. Instead of feeding them with reactions, you remain unresponsive, neutral, and disengaged. This method works not because it is aggressive, but because it refuses to fuel the conflict. Jung's insight anticipated this wisdom. The refusal to participate in unnecessary drama is itself a powerful act of self-preservation. But disappearing is not only about dealing with others, it is also about confronting yourself. Jung insisted that one cannot awaken without facing the unconscious, and silence creates the space for this confrontation. When you disappear from noise, you begin to hear the whispers of your own psyche. When you withdraw from the endless demand to explain, you begin to understand yourself beyond others' perceptions. In this sense, disappearing is not escape. It is an encounter with your deeper self. Let me ask you this. How much of your life is spent explaining yourself to others, and how much of it is spent listening to yourself? If the scales are imbalanced, perhaps it is time to consider how disappearance can bring you back into alignment. Share your thoughts in the comments, because your reflection may spark a realization for someone else who has lived the same struggle. This principle has deep roots in spiritual traditions as well. In Taoism, the idea of Wu Wei, action through non-action, teaches us that sometimes the most powerful move is to step back. In Christianity, Christ himself withdrew to solitude for renewal. In Hinduism, sages retreated to the forests, not to abandon life, but to rediscover its essence. Each of these traditions echoes the same truth Jung recognized, that disappearance is not an ending, but a return to the center. Of course, silence and absence are not always easy. They confront us with uncomfortable truths. To disappear is to face solitude, and solitude reveals parts of ourselves we often prefer to ignore. Yet, as Jung reminded us, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. Sometimes the deepest form of connection is not with others, but with yourself. And disappearing grants you the chance to cultivate that connection. Think of silence as fertile soil. On the surface, it may seem empty, but beneath it, seeds are germinating, roots are expanding, and life is preparing to emerge. This is the paradox of disappearing. What looks like absence to the world is actually profound presence with yourself. The world may not see it, but you will feel it. And from that inner ground, true strength and clarity grow. Now let us reflect on a practical application. Imagine you are in a heated argument and someone is throwing accusations at you. The instinct to defend yourself rises. But if you pause, breathe, and say nothing, what happens? The tension may still be there, but you no longer fuel it. You save your energy, you maintain your dignity, and you avoid a downward spiral. Over time, this practice creates resilience. You begin to realize that not every battle deserves your presence, and not every accusation deserves your explanation. Carl Jung's psychology emphasizes individuation, the journey toward becoming your most authentic self. Part of that journey is learning when to engage and when to withdraw. Not reacting, not explaining, and disappearing at the right time are steps on this path. They are not about abandoning the world, but about engaging with it on your own terms, without losing yourself in the process. So let us ask ourselves, are we willing to disappoint others in order to remain true to ourselves? Are we ready to let go of the need to be understood in order to live in alignment with our own truth? These are not easy questions, but they are essential ones, and they lead us deeper into the wisdom that Jung offers. Because the truth is this: disappearing is not about others at all. It is about you. It is about choosing to no longer waste your life trying to be seen by those who refuse to look, trying to be heard by those who refuse to listen, and trying to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding. When you stop doing that, you step into a new kind of freedom, one that cannot be taken from you. As we move forward, we will explore more deeply the emotional and psychological transformations that occur when we embrace this wisdom. We will see how the choice not to react can protect us from manipulation. We will uncover why explaining yourself endlessly diminishes your inner authority. And we will journey toward the final, most powerful revelation, which will show us the true meaning of disappearing, not as avoidance, but as awakening. Carl Jung once remarked, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." These words strike at the very core of our theme. When you choose not to react, not to explain, and to disappear, you are not merely walking away from conflict. You are walking toward yourself, and that perhaps is the greatest privilege of all. Think for a moment about the nature of reaction. Reaction is immediate, impulsive, and often fueled by emotion rather than clarity. When someone provokes you, your nervous system interprets it as a threat. Adrenaline rises, your mind races, and before you even realize it, words spill out. Later, you may regret them. How many times in your life have you spoken in anger, defended yourself out of fear, or explained yourself from insecurity, only to look back and wish you had remained silent? This is where Jung's wisdom shines. By refusing to react, you create space. Space to think, to breathe, to reflect. That space is what transforms reaction into response, or sometimes into silence. And it is in silence that you begin to reclaim authority over yourself. Not explaining is equally revolutionary. We often believe that explanation is a bridge to understanding, but in truth it can become a prison. When you explain yourself to someone unwilling to listen, you hand them the power to define your reality. They take your words, twist them, and return them to you distorted. Jung understood that explaining is often a trap. It binds you to the other person's framework, instead of allowing you to stand firmly in your own truth. Now consider the act of disappearing. To disappear is not to vanish into nothingness, but to step out of dynamics that no longer serve your soul. It is to choose your inner world over external chaos. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes essential. Individuation is the process of integrating all parts of yourself, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, so that you may live as a whole being. How can you possibly do this if all your energy is spent in constant explanation and reaction? Disappearing creates the sacred space for individuation to unfold. Let me ask you directly, what relationships in your life keep demanding that you explain yourself endlessly? What situations constantly pull you into reaction? And what would happen if, instead of playing along, you simply withdrew your energy? Share your reflections in the comments, because often, by putting words to your own struggles, you help others recognize their own patterns too. To disappear is also to protect the most intimate parts of your psyche. Jung believed that the soul thrives in privacy. The more we expose ourselves to criticism and misunderstanding, the more fragmented we become. Privacy is not secrecy, it is protection. By choosing not to reveal everything, not to justify everything, and not to argue over everything, you preserve the integrity of your inner life. In this way, disappearing is a form of sacred self-preservation. There is a reason why great thinkers, artists, and visionaries throughout history valued solitude. Friedrich Nietzsche withdrew into isolation to write his most powerful works. Henry David Thoreau lived by Walden Pond to rediscover simplicity and authenticity. Even Jung himself spent long periods in retreat, building his tower in Bollingen, where he withdrew from the world to reflect, create, and reconnect with his inner depths. Each of these figures understood that true strength is often born in silence and solitude, not in noise and confrontation. And let us not forget the psychological cost of endless reaction and explanation. Modern research in cognitive science shows that constantly justifying yourself to others increases stress, depletes mental energy, and reinforces patterns of insecurity. People who live in constant defense mode often suffer from anxiety, exhaustion, and a weakened sense of self-worth. Choosing not to explain is not arrogance. It is an act of mental health. Choosing not to react is not indifference. It is emotional intelligence. And choosing to disappear is not weakness. It is self-respect. Imagine this scenario. A friend accuses you of being selfish because you set a boundary. The impulse to defend yourself rises. You want to prove you are not selfish, that your intentions are pure. But what if you simply stayed silent? What if you disappeared from the argument entirely, allowing your boundary to stand without explanation? Over time, those who truly value you will respect your silence, while those who demand endless justifications will fall away. This is the natural sorting that disappearance creates. It filters out the noise and leaves only what is real. Jung often spoke of the shadow, the hidden aspects of ourselves we fear to confront. Interestingly, silence and disappearance can also bring us face to face with our own shadow. When you step away from others, you cannot escape yourself. You meet the parts of you that long for approval, the parts that fear rejection, the parts that ache to be understood. At first, this can be uncomfortable, but as Jung taught, only by confronting the shadow can we integrate it, and in this integration lies wholeness. So, in not reacting, you master your impulses. In not explaining, you release the need for approval. In disappearing, you confront your shadow and rediscover your center. Each of these is not a retreat, but a return to your authentic self, a return to the deep well of strength within you, a return to the truth that you do not need to be understood to be whole. Let me pose another question. If you stopped explaining yourself today, how much energy would you save? If you refused to react to provocation, how much peace would you gain? And if you disappeared from situations that drain your soul, how much of your true life would you recover? These are not rhetorical questions, they are invitations to transformation. As we approach the final stage of this journey, we will arrive at the most powerful revelation of all, that disappearing is not about rejection or avoidance, but about transcendence. It is about rising above dynamics that diminish you, so that you may live from a higher place of truth and freedom. Stay with me, because what comes next may fundamentally reshape the way you view not just your relationships, but your entire existence. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." These words hold the essence of everything we have explored so far. When you refuse to react, when you stop explaining, and when you disappear, you are choosing not to be defined by circumstances, criticisms, or misunderstandings. You are choosing to define yourself. That choice is the ultimate act of becoming. Up until now, we have examined why reaction drains us, why explanation imprisons us, and why disappearing liberates us. But now we must uncover the deepest truth behind Jung's insight. The most powerful revelation is this: disappearing is not about others at all. It is about awakening to your highest self. When you disappear from the noise of misunderstanding, from the endless cycle of defense, from the toxic grip of manipulation, you do not vanish, you transcend. Think about it. Every time you refuse to react, you rise above the level of conflict. Every time you stop explaining yourself, you step outside the prison of others' expectations. Every time you disappear, You free yourself to focus on what truly matters: your growth, your purpose, your becoming. Disappearing is not running away. It is stepping into a higher dimension of living. Imagine a bird flying above a storm. On the ground, the winds rage, trees bend, and chaos reigns. But above the clouds, the sky is clear, and the bird glides effortlessly in silence. That bird does not fight the storm. It rises above it. This is what Jung meant when he invited us not to react, not to explain, but to disappear. It is not about winning an argument. It is not about proving your worth. It is about rising to a level where those battles no longer matter. Let me ask you something very important. How much of your life have you spent trapped in storms that were never yours to fight? How many years have you spent explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you? How much energy have you wasted reacting to situations that only pulled you further away from your truth? And what would your life look like if you chose, from this day forward, to step above those storms instead of into them? This is the awakening Jung points us toward. To disappear is not to lose. It is to win in the most profound way possible. You win back your time, you win back your peace, you win back your inner freedom, and from that place, you can finally live as who you are, not as who the world demands you to be. It is worth remembering that Jung's psychology was never about conformity. It was about individuation, the journey of becoming whole, and individuation demands courage. It demands that you step away from the noise of the collective, from the pressures of society, from the endless demands of others. It demands that you withdraw, reflect, and re-emerge stronger, clearer, and more authentic. Disappearing is part of that journey. But let us go even deeper. The true power of disappearing is that it reconnects you to what is eternal. When you silence the external voices, you begin to hear the voice within, the one that has always been there, waiting. Some call it the unconscious, some call it the soul, some call it the spirit. Whatever name you give it, it is the core of who you are, and it speaks not in noise, but in silence. By disappearing, you return to that voice. You return to yourself. There is also a profound spiritual truth here. Across traditions, withdrawal has always been the path to illumination. The Buddha left the palace to find enlightenment in solitude. Jesus withdrew to the desert before his greatest mission. Mystics, monks, sages, all disappeared from the world for a time, not to escape, but to awaken. Jung's wisdom is part of this lineage. To disappear is not to avoid life, but to prepare to live it more fully. So the next time you are provoked, remember this: silence is not weakness. The next time someone demands an explanation you do not owe, remember this: your truth does not require permission. And the next time you feel trapped in a cycle of reaction and defense, remember this: disappearing may be the doorway to your greatest freedom. Now I ask you one final question. Are you ready to live this way? Are you ready to stop scattering your energy in battles that do not matter and to start investing it in your own awakening? If the answer is yes, then Jung's wisdom has already begun to take root in you. As we close this journey together, let us remember: do not react, do not explain, simply disappear. For in disappearing, you do not vanish, you transform. You do not lose, you ascend. And you do not weaken, you awaken. That is the true power Carl Jung wanted us to see. It is the power of becoming who you truly are. So take this message with you. Let it guide you the next time the world demands your reaction, your justification, your endless presence in conflicts that do not serve you. And instead of giving them your energy, give that energy back to yourself, because your life, your peace, and your awakening are worth far more than any argument, any explanation, or any storm. Thank you for being here, for reflecting, and for allowing these words to resonate with your journey. If this message has touched you, share it with someone who may need this reminder. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Leave your like and let us know in the comments how this wisdom of Jung is transforming your perspective. Together, we can build a community of reflection, growth, and awakening. And always remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to speak, not to defend, not to react, but to step back, disappear, and rise above. For in that silence, you will find not emptiness, but everything. Thanks for looking.